Thank you very much. I guess that in one subculture and the other, so I will be the other, because I will speak about politics. And first I would like to thank Yui Sensei as well as Nakano-san for organizing such a wonderful conference. I know it is not easy to organize conferences as a person who just experienced it 2 weeks ago, and I'm still struggling to recover from it. I would like also to thank the organizers for inviting me, because I don't come from the world of manga studies, which is okay, I guess. I'm a political scientist in training, and my previous research dealt with politics or political economy of Japanese pop culture, especially in its Southeast Asian context. But when I was approached to talk about it, I thought this is a great opportunity to start a new research related to manga and politics, and I will explain why I chose to focus on this. Plus, I thought it's a good chance, to come to Kobe and listen to so many interesting papers. And it was a few months ago, but when the last month came and I had to send my papers, I was struggling actually trying to find a way out of it. What I'm doing here, I'll try to introduce my discipline, political science, politics of memory, into this world of manga, and I'll try to contribute and do my best for the wider project. I would like to start actually with a personal episode that made me interested in this connection between historical memory and manga. It's a conversation I had with a Japanese friend of mine a few years ago. I shall call him Toshi. But actually, Toshi is his real name. Anyway, Toshi and I used to play soccer when I was living in Kyoto, and we became friends. He was a kind of shakaijin. He was about the same age. He liked reading. He traveled in some places in the world. He liked to ask me questions about my country, from Israel, by the way. And at that time, he was working a part-time job in Albaito. One time, we somehow came to talk about Japanese wartime history. And Toshi told me he liked reading Kobayashi's mangas about the war, Senso. When we continued to talk, I had a feeling that actually some of the ideas, some of the narratives in the manga were coming out or voiced from Toshi's mouth, but actually he was echoing some of the ideas from the manga itself. When I asked Toshi why did he like Kobayashi's manga, he said that this manga and the stories, hakiriyu, it says things straight, directly, not like the other textbooks and the other things you read in the newspapers will each go around in circles. It gives you the real picture as it is. Talking with Toshi actually was a very different experience from talking with my other university friends at that time and professors about narratives of the war, and from what I read about the issues in Japanese and English books. It was then that I understood actually the problem is actually with me. That my knowledge about Japanese perceptions of history comes mainly from elite circles, academic and intellectual discourse, and we're talking with university graduates. But I and my colleagues were actually isolated from much of the environment that for a big segment of the population shapes the perceptions of politics and history. I started to suspect perhaps manga and other forms of pop culture are not so naive as I previously thought. Perhaps popular culture is profoundly important for understanding and debating history, politics, and nationalism, even more than the formal institutions and mechanisms such as the state policy, the education system, or influential academic magazines and journals we like to cite, Chuoko. Right? Of course, manga heavily relies on history, and many of the post-war mangas are depictions of semi-fictional actual events. But it never occurred to me that the power of manga is not only in reflecting dramatic versions of history, but also in the making of history itself. It might come as no surprise for people working on manga, but unfortunately, from the field I'm coming from, political science, many of my colleagues still think that manga and popular culture in general are irrelevant for discussing history and politics, and this echoes Jacqueline-san's comment this morning about the disciplinary boundary that exists about studying manga. So here we will try to break through this discipline. In this paper, I examine the way in which the past is being evoked, not in the traditional form of textbooks, museums, and monuments, but rather as a past which is insinuated into the surroundings through the experience of manga. The investigation itself focuses on Japan's manga industry as a medium for political and historical expression and debate. I am especially interested in looking at the way historical memories are being shaped by manga, and if and how they break through the conventional means used so far to affect political perceptions and attitudes. In a broader sense, my attempt is to conceptualize the connection between manga and political history. As part of this attempt, I developed the concept of banal memory to analyze the way in which everyday popular culture routine, such as reading manga, becomes part of constructing historical memory. Now, the question is, what makes people remember? When we think about the institutions and mechanisms that make people remember, we can see the next list. First, of course, we tend to think about highly nationalized institutions, such as the education system, state-supported museums, monuments and exhibitions, and the state's educational and cultural policies. A second cluster of forces having an impact on the construction of historical memory includes the mass media, which in both democratic and non-democratic countries set the agenda for thinking about history. Intellectual and academic discourse is also a major source of historical memory. Elite discourse exists in every society, even in the most open, multi-ethnic, multicultural, and pluralist society. Elite discourse presumably provides sophisticated interpretations of history and feeds the education system as well as politicians and the mass media with analysis and narratives they can use. For some people, personal encounters with traumatic experiences or with people who had such an experience may play an important role in constructing their historical memory. For Palestinians, for example, the memory of the destruction of their communities in 1948, what they call the Nakba, is almost entirely constructed by oral history, testimonies of relatives. It has an enduringly strong impact on the identity of Palestinians today and on the way they're viewed of conflict with the State of Israel. But what about manga? Does manga have a meaningful impact on the way people think about history and politics? Not only depicting history and politics. Given that a large number of people in Japan, young and old, are exposed to manga and spend many hours reading it, can we assume that these practices have an impact on their worldviews, introduce new images and options, and create new social and political symbolic references? I think that it is obvious that popular culture, including manga, has a strong ability to provide the context for people to develop their perceptions and images of things and places they do not know. Think, for example, how powerful was the role of Hollywood movies in introducing the American way of life and in disseminating ideas and perceptions about America. However, how does this influence historical memory on the macro-national level? Not only reflecting history, but also creating vastly accepted historical narratives. At this point, I would like to introduce this idea of manga as banal memory. I would like, actually, here I try to conceptualize the way manga and other popular culture products may contribute to the construction of historical memory. I follow Michael Billing's conceptualization of banal nationalism, referring to everyday presentations of the nation that construct an imagined sense of national solidarity and belonging. His main idea is that nationalism includes ideological habits that are not removed from the everyday in terms of time and space. For example, cheering a young national team, soccer team, on an international tournament. Or in Europe, there is such a thing called Eurovision, where each country sends music artists to compete. I think the last country to win was Sweden, right? You don't like it? Another example, actually from Japan, is the Hi no Maru Bento for kindergarten, where children not only get to know their national flag, but also consume it. Right? It's a part of everyday practice that you don't think about it, but indirectly it might contribute to the sense of the nation, or what is the nation. The term banal memory refers to the ordinary, commonplace and ongoing practices by which a variety of memories are created, propagated, and reproduced. The word banal refers to everyday and thus often little noticed activities that people undertake in their ongoing lives. Practices of banal memory touch upon fields as diverse as leisure, material culture, consumption, architecture, sporting events, or popular culture. Many activities related to this field are effective precisely because of their constant repetition and almost subliminal nature. The practice of consuming manga exemplifies the idea of banal memory, a history which is being constructed through everyday practice. To start with, in market economies, the dissemination of manga is a highly spontaneous process which follows a strong capitalistic logic, driven by the power of the market rather than the will of governments. Unlike rumination of elite class, irrelevant for the majority of people, manga is a highly widespread medium. Moreover, manga and discourses it arose consist part of what political scientists call political culture, referring to the way values, decisions, and political personalities are shaped by personal and environmental factors linked to childhood events, family relations, the surrounding culture, educational background, exposure to the media, etc. In consumer-driven societies, such as Japan, manga and other popular culture commodities compose an integral part of the environment where the political values and behaviors of the younger generation are being nurtured. Young consumers are constantly exposed to images and information about life coming from such products and artifacts as movies, television programs, anime, pop music videos, popular literature, fashion magazines, video games, and of course manga. These cultural commodities have been insulated into the daily lives of the young people, and their consumption constitutes part of their identity. In this sense, manga, which embodies images and narratives of unknown places and situations, unintentionally provide information and references to big audiences through the process of consumption. Now next, I will examine two narratives of Japan in war, of war in Japan, represented by work of two seemingly very different mangaka, Tezuka Osamu and Kobayashi Yoshinori. I do that in order to exemplify two of the ways in which war narratives have been constructed in Japanese manga, and to demonstrate the different historical readings they offer. I will start with the first one, and actually this is Tezuka Osama's Adolf Nitsugu. I don't know how many of you knows this manga. How many knows this manga? Okay, the majority. Okay, I chose this manga. Of course, you can choose another manga, but I chose this manga because it represents the meta narratives I want to talk about. But also because I knew that the conference is here in Kobe, and as you know, the story starts here in this cosmopolitan city of Kobe. Tezuka's realistic manga Adolf Nitsugu, Reconstructing Adolf, is a good representation of the hegemonic narrative of post-war manga, reflecting a sense of fatigue from the horrors of war. War and misery are the background for humanistic stories rather than the object of attention, and the representation of ordinary people who live in a semi-fictional past. It is part of a wide range of historical manga where historical events are utilized, human dramas explored, and intense emotions shown for the sake of the story. Adolf Nitsugu first appeared in Japanese between 1983 and 85. It is a daring blend of fact and fiction, set mainly between fact of fiction, set mainly between 1936 and 1945, and tells the story of two children named Adolf, living in the cosmopolitan city of Kobe then. One is a young German Jew, and the other is his friend, the son of a German Nazi diplomat and a Japanese mother. There is also a third Adolf in the story, Hitler himself, who according to secret accounts has Jewish blood. The German Adolf goes back to Germany and eventually becomes a Nazi officer executing Jewish prisoners, while the Jewish Adolf